Mike,
You're muted.
trying to talk.
Muted. Let me try that one more time. Good evening and welcome to the 5:30 council briefing on September 21st. Staff has 4 items that we'd like to go over with City Council this evening. Anything that we do not get through today will be pushed till the next briefing, which will take place in October. We do have a council meeting that is starting up on Zoom at 7 p.m. So we'll try to wrap up by no later than 6:45 to 6:50-ish to allow us all to log into the next meeting as well. First item that we'd like to go over with you tonight is local business support. And this is something that we've been talking about in-house for the past several weeks. We wanted to have a conversation with council as to those things we've either been doing or specifically not been doing for the benefit of our local businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. This was compiled with some additional information related to the conversation at the last briefing, where there were questions about when we thought we might go back to consumption on-premise alcohol sales for 2 a.m. instead of the midnight that we had had. We did have all 3 beach mayors get together, and after talking with the city managers and the police chiefs and gathering all the information, there was a consensus that we were ready to move back to 2 a.m. It so happens that that decision was made at the same time that the governor was making his decision to allow bars to open to 50%. And I would just like it noted for the record that we had made the decision to go back to 2 a.m. prior to his public announcement. But with that being said, with that particular issue, bars are now allowed to be open 50% capacity. And as of last Monday, they were also allowed, along with restaurants and other establishments that sell for consumption on premise, to stay open to our extended hours of 2 a.m. provided they have the appropriate permitting and licensing. So that was issue number 1. The second thing we wanted to go over with you were some of the things that we've taken some administrative flexibility with over the past several months in order to benefit local businesses. Hopefully you all received a 1 sheet of bullet points and some talking points related to what we've done from a staff perspective. And the 3 things that I want to talk about are with regards to outdoor dining, the purchase of restaurant licenses for bars, and temporary signage provisions. And the purchase of restaurant license is really tied to our grease trap ordinance. So we'll come back around to it from that perspective. The first is to talk a little bit about where we have fallen in the pecking order with regards to what businesses can or can't do either locally or in the state of Florida. While we have our own sets of regulations, we've also found ourselves over the last 6 months competing with the governor and DBPR with regards to messaging to the business community. And we've tried to make sure that we are consistent with what the intentions of the governor is as we move forward as a community. So one of the things that hit us very early on was the governor said that the intention was for restaurants, when they were to reopen at 50%, to take advantage of outdoor dining space as much as they could. There were suggestions from the DBPR that they take over portions of their parking lot, that they utilize green spaces, that they try to get as much capacity as they could outside of the building because they were being limited to what they could have inside of the building. In very short order, we had several restaurants that were taking advantage of the governor and the DBPR's direction and started putting tables and tents and canopies outside in their parking lots or in some of their common areas outside of their establishments. For those of you that are familiar with our land development code, anytime you have a private parcel that is being used as a restaurant or commercial establishment, we usually have a minimum number of parking spaces required in order to support the business. With that being said, administratively, we took the position that if they were being restricted to 50% capacity inside of their establishment, we were not going to go out and cite them for setting up in their parking lots, specifically because A, the governor was telling them that it was okay to do, and B, we knew that their parking would also be down because of the 50% restriction on their property. So if you've gone around to several of the food service establishments in the community, you've seen that some of them still are utilizing tents, tables, and chairs in their parking lots for the purposes of providing outdoor dining so that they can make it through these difficult times where their capacity is significantly reduced internally. The second issue that we had to deal with was with regards to the purchasing of restaurant licenses. It came to our attention, I think it was back at the beginning of July, that the DBPR was indicating to bars that if they were to purchase a restaurant license and sell food, that they would be allowed to reopen because they're technically a restaurant at that point in time. There was question with regards to enforcement of the 51% food sales, but clearly this was a path that was being endorsed by the DBPR. The issue that we found ourselves in was with regards to our grease trap ordinance. The grease trap ordinance, which we passed back in the fall of 2019, just before the holidays, is basically tied to the title of a restaurant. It has nothing to do with the size of your restaurant, the types of food that you serve, etc. So we found ourselves in the predicament of having multiple establishments throughout the city that now possessed a food service license, but didn't necessarily have a commercial grade kitchen and were not necessarily serving food to the same extent that you would find at an actual restaurant with a 2 COP or 4 COP extension. So a conscious decision has also been made that we are essentially in limbo with regards to enforcing the grease trap ordinance. We did not feel it was right for us to go knock on doors and tell establishments that were using these licenses in a temporary capacity that they needed to go out and spend $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 to install a conforming grease trap, when at some point in the near future, the governor would come forward and say, bars can now be open or restaurants can now go from 50% capacity to either 75 or 100% capacity. So at this point in time, we've basically taken a step back from enforcement of the grease trap ordinance with regards to the upgrades, making people install new conforming grease traps at this point in time. The third issue is with regards to temporary signage. When non-essential businesses were closed for the first few months of the pandemic, and then they were allowed to start reopening, we had a lot of businesses that were trying to put signs out to tell the community, we're open for business, we're still here. And we had a lot of people that were going out of their way to putting signs either in the public right of way or putting out non-conforming signage with regards to our code that started to draw the attention of other business owners and members of the community. What we did as an organization was pointed them back to our sign ordinance with regards to temporary signage, where we specifically have provisions for any business within the community to take advantage of temporary signage for 30 days every year. And that is to address the fact that they may have special sales, special events, etc. With that being said, we have not gone out of our way to tell these businesses that are operating at reduced capacity, and in a lot of instances, probably having difficulty making payroll or rent, that those signs have to come down at this point in time. The reason we're having this conversation with you as council is because A, we're still in a declared state of emergency. B, these are decisions that were made administratively and within the organization for the betterment of the business community. C, we wanted to make sure that you were aware of what we had been doing and what our intention is going forward as well. No city manager likes to be in the position of saying that we're not enforcing certain sections of our codes and ordinances. But this is a very difficult time, not just for the businesses within our community, but throughout the state and throughout the entire country. And we're trying to be as reasonable as we can to make sure that as we get closer to a vaccine and closer to normalcy, that as many businesses as possible have the opportunity to come back into full existence and ramp back up and have minimal impact on our local economy here in the city of Jacks Beach and the surrounding Duval County. One of the thoughts is that if you're in concurrence with the actions that we've taken over the past several months, we would probably document this through some type of a resolution, bring this back to city council and have that resolution be adopted. Our intention with the outdoor dining is that as long as restaurants are at 50%, we would not come in and enforce the parking requirements on them. Obviously, that might change in the near future. The governor might go to 75% or 100%, and we could address the restrictions at that point in time. With regards to grease traps, the same things apply. I think you saw in the note that we gave you, the original thought when we put this together was that bars were not allowed to be open yet. We would basically see how the numbers look over the next couple of weeks, but if they all look good, the intention would be to go to the bars and say, now that you're allowed to be open, we would like you to basically surrender or void those restaurant extensions. So that way you're no longer obligated to put the grease trap in, and give them a 90-day window within which to allow that license to lapse or be revoked. With regards to the restaurants, once their capacity was increased, that's when we would go to them and say, now it's time to put your grease trap in, but we need to make sure they can actually survive this issue first. The temporary signage is another trickier one. Right now, all of the non-essential businesses and food services are all restricted to 50% capacity. We would suggest that we allow people to continue to use those temporary signage provisions until such time as they're allowed to go back up to either 75% or 100% capacity, at which point the signage may no longer be necessary. But we wanted to hear what some of your thoughts were on the actions that we've taken tonight, and see if there were any suggestions for further direction. And with that, I will open the floor to council. And Ms. Dumont, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I just had a question as to whether we need a resolution. I can understand the resolution with regard to delaying the grease traps for 90 days. But then other than that, we're having a resolution saying we're not going to follow our own ordinances. I see that more as an administrative role, bureaucratic discretion as to whether you're going to enforce it or you're not going to enforce it. It's not like we're going to yell at ourselves or say that you're supposed to do this. So I don't see the need for the resolution with regard, especially when we're looking at signs and the outdoor seating. I do see it with the grease traps because that's when you start getting into a financial impact on individual businesses. So I can see delaying the update to the grease trap ordinance to 90 days after the seating restrictions expires. But other than that, I just see these more as administrative actions, and there's no need for council with it.
Yeah, I appreciate your input on that. And again, I propose that out there specifically because as the chief administrator for the city, it's me making those decisions not to enforce them. And obviously there needs to be a comfort level with council as to the actions we're taking. And if council's okay with not putting a resolution forward, with the exception of grease traps, I'm okay with that as well. But that's why I'd like to hear from all of you as to what you think we should be doing. Next up is Councillor Golding.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. Yeah, that I am fine with it. So yes, I am fine with all of these things administratively.
Councillor Golding.
I agree. I'm fine with all the things that you've done to this point. I think it's great that you did it. And I did drive around the community this weekend just to kind of look at things. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't see that there was a whole lot in the way of temporary signage that was out there that looked tacky or bad or problematic or anything like that. If anything, it looked really good. So and then as far as the extra seating, I didn't see that looked like it was a problem anywhere either. So I think I agree with Ms. Dumont as far as the resolution for the grease trap updates. I'd be fine with that, and then just continue to handle the other things administratively.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I agree with Ms. Golding and Ms. Dumont. I think because of the nature of how changeable the DVPR can be in particular, they seem to have some autonomy from what the governor actually instructs them to do. I think that if we were to go ahead and make this, vote on this and kind of make it permanent, it might be redundant because it's, we are at their mercy, really. I do see the point in the grease trap ordinance because, pouring grease down the drain does create a hardship for the city. That's why we put that together in the first place. And it would be good to see some people come up to not just the grease trap ordinance, but just basically restaurant hygiene standards. We're not actually having the health department inspect a lot of these places, and I just have concerns that some of the you know, I don't want people getting sick from food poisoning as well as COVID. So, you know, yeah, definitely we need to be stringent on the grease trap. And then, but I also had a question about enforcement. Do we have the fire marshal or the police actually taking head counts in certain establishments? Or is that just the ABT are doing that? Do you know?
We have Chief Smith on the line. I don't know if he wants to speak. I know that the fire marshal has gone to all of the establishments in the city and put a new fire marshal's label on every one of their windows for the 50 capacity. With that being said, the police are not necessarily going in with a clicker and head counting. They're doing a visual look to see if it appears to be the number that is on the window. Obviously, if it's over by a couple, they're not going to make a big issue out of it. But if it's really, you know, listed at 50 and there's 100 inside, they're going to say something to the manager or the ownership. But if it's listed at 50 and it looks like it might be 55, they're not going to go in there and cause problems with it as long as they're seated. The seating and tables are all appropriately distanced, and the proper social distancing is taking place.
Well, and have there been, to your knowledge, have there been any violations, or have the police had to speak to anybody regarding their capacity?
When this first started, I know we don't have, actually we do have Steve Shadow on the line. Steve, if you can hear us and would like to chime in with the businesses you had to talk to.
When we first started, there were some issues, but they got straightened out. Where we ran into difficulty with some of them was people would take their occupancy number for the whole building. Remember, if you got a 2-story building, you've got occupancy number for the first floor and second floor. Well, they'd take half and try to put that at half on the first floor, which we had to correct some of that. Some of the occupancies had those problems. The last place I had a problem with last month was the down on one that gets overlooked a lot because it's not with our regular restaurants and nightclub bars, is Whiskey Jack's. They had a bunch of issues going on down there, but it seems like everybody else has been doing really well, and now they understand what they're supposed to do. Haven't had any real issues.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to some of the bar and restaurant owners, and I mean, we're all trying to get on the same page regarding just keeping people safe. We don't need another spike, or we don't need a reoccurrence of what happened after Memorial Day. And, you know, it's kind of helpful to know that people are in compliance because, like I said, you know, we really don't need another huge spike, which, you know, depending on what news channel you watch, could be coming up next week or after the election. We'll see. But yeah, that's good to hear that most people are in compliance. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem Hoffman.
I just wanted to echo the support of my colleagues. I think it's great that these are some things we've been able to do to help our local businesses with minimal to no negative impact on the city. And my question is there anything else that the businesses have been asking for beyond this that we're more reluctant to do, or do we feel like we've covered, as far as the areas that we can help out with, have we covered that largely from what the businesses need?
The big thing that they were asking for us when this first started was the signage. We had a lot of people that were putting out what was basically illegal signage. We had the conversations with them. We directed them to the section of the code that talked about temporary signage. They were able to comply with the definitions of temporary signage. The only thing we've done is allow that time frame to go beyond the 30 days. The grease trap one is, you know, obviously one where we're sensitive to the fiscal impact. Putting in an in-ground grease trap in accordance with our new code is not inexpensive, anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000, depending on location and plumbing connections. And when we've got businesses hanging on by a shoestring, we just don't feel it's right to tell them, here's your time limit to put it in, and if you can't pay the bill, that's not our fault. But they haven't really been beating down our door for anything outside of the items that you see in front of you today.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And Councillor Nichols.
I agree. You've done a very good job. As you know, I'm pro-business, and I think the fact that we even made the step to keep everything open till 2 a.m. before the governor passed his ordinance or his directive, I think that's great. And I have talked to a couple of the establishment owners, and even though the weather this past weekend was horrible, they definitely saw from a financial standpoint, a decent increase to where, you know, they feel like they see some light at the end of the tunnel. I've also seen that they've been very, very adamant about the number of people in the establishment to make sure they're meeting the 50%. And I just think y'all have done a great job, and I do agree with the grease traps as well.
Okay. I think that gives me the direction that I was looking for. Appreciate all the feedback from council. And if there's no further comments, we'll roll into item number 2, which is Public Works reorganization. As many of you know, Dennis Barron, our new Public Works Director, has now been on the job for just a little over 6 months. One of the things that he and I talked about early on was that if he wanted to make any changes within the department from a structural perspective to where he thought it would function better, by all means to bring those suggestions forward, and let's see where they go. So he's going to talk to you a little bit about what his proposed reorganization is. You should have all received earlier today an email from Chris Wright that contained the current org chart and the proposed org chart. We sent that to you separate because as my paranoia kicked in, I tried to pull it up on my computer and see if I could read it on a shared screen on Zoom. And clearly, if you're viewing this on a laptop or an iPad, you would not be able to see any of the detail in the org chart. So we wanted to make sure you had it in advance, had the ability to zoom in, zoom out, pan to different areas, or print it as I see Councillor Nichols has done. And then that way you can ask questions accordingly. So here to speak about this is Dennis Barron, our Public Works Director, and we also have Ann Muse, our Human Resources Director, on the line for any questions and assistance you might need. Dennis, all yours.
Good evening. I hope everybody's internet connection seems to be better than mine tonight. I'm catching a lot of chattering, so I'm going to try to move through this. And if you lose me, we hope Mike can pick up the pieces and run with it, because mine's being a little sketchy tonight for some reason. So I've got a handful of things just to kind of discuss to show you what we've got and what we've got, where we're going. I've been here 8.5 months at this point in time. I've had 2 superintendents retire. One of them earlier than expected for personal reasons. COVID-19, of course, has put a big hindrance in being able to do any hiring realistically for a lot of this part. And I've really taken me some time to look back at our operations and make some determination as to how I see the future of Public Works and what I see happening and coming. So basically the primary org chart that I gave you with the blue squares on it shows what I've got, what I inherited when I came in. The focus I saw an issue with is when you get to the water and the PCP operations, what you ultimately end up with is a whole bunch of people all reporting up to the superintendent. And that kind of creates some issues when you've got that many different people all reporting up to the same person, and there's not a whole lot of hierarchy involved in that particular department. Where I came from was the beginning of water and sewer operations kind of being put into one particular group, partially because a pump is a pump and a motor is a motor, and a lot of the work can really go cross-reference between both of those divisions. A stormwater pump acts the same as a well water pump, which acts the same as a lift station pump. So a lot of those have a lot of transferable knowledge between the two. And as I began to look through the streets and D&C department as well, I began to see some similarities in their department with working on the streets, a lot of working hand in hand between installing new water services and sewer services, and then that turn around and involves, you know, the reparations of the street as well. So I began to kind of put this together in my mind to look at switching some operations up and some of the way that they are structured. So the second sheet that you're attached, which has all of the yellow and dark blue bubbles, you kind of see what the new organization looks. Now, this first and foremost, this does not increase manpower. There is no additional bodies involved in this chart. We've had finance review this as well. There's no additional nominal cost to being able to do this restructuring within Public Works. What you kind of see is that you formulate under two main categories, with streets and D&C as one category with a superintendent and a deputy superintendent, and then the same thing on water and PCP side with the utility plant operations superintendent and a deputy superintendent, and then split down to the actual individual plants from there. And this allows a lot better span of control. Some of the things we've discovered with COVID, of course, too, was name a second in command in case something happens. And the second in command for Jack's Beach has been a lot of times in the administrative / engineering division. But when it comes to COVID, when you're dealing with trying to keep operations moving, that didn't necessarily fit with the puzzle as to who would want to be in charge in an emergency situation, as well as what happens if we happen to have the nasty hurricane word come around and we're dealing with a cleanup process, and it might not necessarily fit to have one particular department. It may be better to have another different department. So this really kind of works for the delegation of authority in case there's something that happens. It's just kind of moving around the 4 superintendents to create 2 superintendents with 2 deputy superintendents underneath them, and then the plant operations managers actually is a position that allows some opportunity for advancement in there. This does, like I said, mainly is helping us across the board with the span of control. It better identifies the individual leadership positions, as well as it really eliminates a lot of the separated silos. It seems like we spend a lot of time saying, well, this is my work and that's your work. And now it's really easy to kind of come back and say it's our work and it's our equipment and it's our shared resources. And we've can actually move bodies around to address issues and problems a little faster with being able to have fewer silos of operation. And these silos are actually working very, very well together across those the 2 departments that are actually left to be able to work together, especially when it comes to stormwater and wastewater and water operations. And I don't really have any other request other than that. That is kind of what I'm looking at doing. Like I said, I'm functioning right now with some acting positions in these people, and so I'm just looking to kind of bring this before you to make this more permanent.
And as a quick summary or a wrap up for Dennis's presentation, the reason we're showing this to you tonight is that while it's literally a financial wash and we still have the same number of bodies, some position titles and the pay classifications would change between the current org chart and the proposed org chart. So if council's okay with the restructure, it would be our intention to bring an item to you in October, hopefully at the first meeting in October, to ratify the changes within the pay plan to encompass those new job descriptions and titles and their pay classifications. You'd probably also have a little bit more of a financial breakdown on that at the time. But again, as Dennis indicated, when we talked org chart, the first thing we said was it needed to be pretty close to cost neutral. And Dennis took a look at it and said, well, everything that I'm thinking of comes back as cost neutral anyways. But we wanted you to see it before we actually put it on a council meeting for your consideration as a resolution to amend the pay plan. And I see there are 2 hands raised. The first one is Councilmember Doherty.
Oh, that was from last time, but I just had a quick question. Dennis, did you say you were short employees? That you couldn't? There was positions open?
We do have 2 vacancies right now. That was the D&C superintendent position as well as the water superintendent. The D&C position was vacated in, I think, March or April, right at the beginning of the COVID fund. And then we had Mike Taylor out of the water plant retired the first weekend in July. So okay. Neither one of those positions have been filled. And I've kind of been working with this chart all along, trying to figure out how do I want to restructure, which is partially why we haven't filled those positions, as well as with COVID kind of interrupting any kind of interviews we would be doing. I wanted to kind of get all my eggs in a basket before I begin to figure out exactly how to backfill any of the positions.
Okay, are we competitive in the market regarding pay and benefits for those positions?
We are. We are, especially for these. You're starting to find that this water, and especially water in the PCP operations, are beginning to function at a higher level with the operations superintendent title overseeing both of those. That's kind of why we're looking at upgrading those two superintendent positions from a 324 to a 326. Doesn't seem like it's a big increase, but when you start really talking about that they're over two divisions instead of one division, there is a little bit of a need for additional training and additional licensing, as well as just additional experience to do that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councillor Nichols?
Hey, Dennis, the only question I had is, do you anticipate any more retirements or any more positions opening up in the near future?
At this time, I do not. I know I have several people that would, might be looking at in the 5-year plan. That was one of the things Mike talked about when we started talking about this reorganization, to make sure this was something that was going to be able to.
I'll finish his sentence.
Now I got to redo it again. So.
Dennis, you cut out a little bit, but I'll, if you want, you can just repeat that last section about the direction that I gave you when you were looking at the org chart.
Sorry about that. I explained I was having some internet fun. So Mike wanted me to make sure that I had the ability to make this a long-term change or a longer-term change with at least a minimum of a 5-year outlook before I would look at trying to do any alterations further to either change or do this. And I do not have any positions that I'm aware of that would be retiring any quicker than that. We do have some that would be eligible. I don't know whether they're going to exercise that right or not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Dennis or HR Director Muse, who's also on the line? So consensus to bring this forward for implementation? You'll see something in October with all of the changes to pay and class. Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
With that, we've got 2 more items on the books. Items 3 and 4 are changes to Chapter 10, Fire and Life Safety, and new Chapter 5, Animal Code and Dog Leash Regs. I'm going to turn the floor over to Chris Ambrosio, our City Attorney, and let him lead the conversation on these next 2 items. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, Council. So Steve and I worked on making changes to Chapter 10, which is titled the Fire and Life Safety Code. And the reasons for making these changes are because the fire department no longer exists and the organization and personnel have changed. So those are primary changes that we needed to, that called for a revision to the chapter. Also, we needed to readdress the Article 5 on the Board of Appeals as it relates to the fire code and violations. We needed to make clarifications in the reference and inclusion of the most current edition of the fire prevention code. We needed to address the marshal's duties and authorities, which remains substantially unchanged, but needed just a little bit of clarification. We needed to improve the wording and numbering throughout the chapter. And we wanted to address sections that speak to the investigations of fires and open burning and recreational fires. That's an overview summary of the changes that we've made to Chapter 10. I forwarded to all the council members our current working draft, which provided a strike through and underline version of the working draft so you can see the changes we made. And if you have any specific questions about Chapter 10, the draft, Steve and I are both available for you tonight. And if there aren't any questions, then I can move forward with another final read through with Steve, make sure that we're comfortable with the wording, and I will put this into an ordinance format for first reading for council's review at a subsequent council meeting. Steve, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think we're good. You covered it well there. We just had to clean up that open burning area and there, make it easier for people to understand it. But no, I'm good. If the council's happy, I am.
So
Okay.
Chris, I did have one question.
Okay,
The Board of Appeals, as of right now, is not created, right?
that's right.
So once this is passed, that would lead to the creation of that board.
It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to create it, but we wanted to draft the ordinance so that the code will have it if council wants us to move forward with creating that board.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Right, it'll be called the Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals. And I've spoken to Steve about that, and we still haven't been in a rush to necessarily to create that board.
It's been 1998, I think was the last time we used it, Chris. And that was with the new pier project with Jacksonville over the pier. There are so many other ways for people for changes to be made, but this is one the state says we have to have available. The board would only meet one time a year, and that was just to appoint the members, unless somebody brought something to it.
So Chris, this would be another board other than the short-term rental board that's looking at fire safety or short-term rentals. Is there a way we can combine them? Because it's hard to get people to volunteer to serve on boards. Is there a possible way to combine the duties of the two boards and have one overarching name?
I don't think we should, because the composition of the board in relation to the fire life safety code is going to be different from the composition of what we would seek in a short-term vacation rental.
Can you explain that further?
Sure. Let me see what we have for. So the way we currently have Chapter 10 drafted is the composition of the Board of Appeals for Chapter 10 for the fire code shall comprise of 5 members to be appointed by City Council, and a first and second alternate. And I would suggest that, well, there's a certain qualification that members of the board shall be a resident of the city for 2 years prior to appointment and a qualified elector. I would suggest that we would want to address the composition as it's drafted in the ordinance, which is it shall be composed of members with expertise in engineering or architectural design, general contracting, fire protection contracting, fire department operations, or fire code and building code enforcement. And so those qualifications may not come into play for a short-term vacation rental appeal board, but they are certainly significant for this board. And I would suggest that I know that although it's difficult to try to find candidates for our boards, this board is such a specialized area, has such specialized areas that we want our members to be experts in. Those qualifications might not be relevant in the short-term vacation rental appeals.
And we have no qualifications that we're looking for currently with the short-term rental board. If I
Right.
recall, the short-term rental board, a lot of it is, are these operating outside of being licensed by the state? And the reason for that is fire and safety for the people who are staying in those short-term rentals. That's why I see a lot of overlap, but I see your point as well. And I just think that we're still in a very ambiguous phase with regard to the short-term rental board, even though
Yeah, I agree.
it's in code, but we don't really know what we're doing with it yet.
There's no question about that. And actually, we have information coming to the council soon about short-term vacation rentals, but that's not for tonight. But I think it's important that we added, Steve and I suggested and added a sentence to the qualifications for this fire board, which is no more than one member of the board shall represent the same field. So not only are we looking for these very specific specializations and expertise but we're looking for all of, as many of those to be represented on the board as possible. Meaning we'd like to have an architectural design expert, a fire protection contracting expert in engineering, building code enforcement. So we're looking for a diversity among the board members and as many of these expertise specializations to be covered.
Are we writing this too narrow?
It's pretty well. laid-
Because you have to live in the city for 2 years, and if we already have somebody with fire expertise, you can't be in it. We have to go search out somebody with architectural design expertise. Again, the concern is always, do we have what we're looking for in the city? And I'm sure we have plenty of people who have those expertise, but are they willing to give their time to the city? If that ends up being that's something else. So I don't think we should, I would be concerned with how narrow we're going. I'd like to have a little bit more flexibility as to who we are looking for, what the qualifications would be to be able to serve on those boards. Just so that I just don't want another empty board.
Right.
This would be our
Yeah.
second empty board that does not exist.
On this board here, it's directed, this language is straight out of the Florida statute. They're the ones who have said you can only have one person from the building field, one from fire protection field, one legal, you can have one general citizen. It's actually in the state statute underneath the fire codes that's separating how we're doing this one. It is very limited in the things they can direct and make corrections on, if they have a problem with it. So there's not much room for it, but I don't know unless we have something else that says the people can't serve on the other board also. So that may be something to look at, but as far as the makeup of the board, and there are a lot of that's right out of the Florida statute. The 2-year part and the resident part, that's all things we can work with. That's not part of the Florida statute, but that makeup of one person from each profession like that is out of the Florida statute.
And we're bound by that.
Yes, ma'am.
And we don't have that board currently.
No, ma'am, we do not.
Nothing like it. So why do we need one now with all of those?
We have to be able to, if somebody brings a complaint up and wants to take it to the board, we have to make it available within 30 days. So we need to have the policy.
Let's say I have a complaint. I file a complaint and we don't have a board. Where does it go?
Where does the complaint go?
Yeah.
The complaint will come to us, and then we have to arrange to get these 5 members of this board together to hear their complaint. And
Even if we don't have a board, because I'm just saying, like right now we don't have a board. If we have a complaint and a complaint comes in, there's no board for them to complain to.
Right. So we're going to scamper out there and get our members and bring them in. The 5 people. We have names, and we have some people, we had 2 that were interested in it, but people really don't want to go to a board that's not even may not do anything. If somebody volunteers, they usually want to be involved in something. And that's the problem with what the state's done to us in making us have this in there.
And it calls for the council to appoint the 7 members, 5 plus 2 alternates. So we'd
That's
have to
what
go
they
through
may
an
be happy
appointment.
serving also on the other one, maybe not, I don't know. But
And the 2-year requirement, by the way, I guess that was pre-existing from when this section of the chapter was originally drafted. So the 2-year requirement was a carryover, but we can remove the 2-year requirement, which would be the requirement that they're a resident for 2 years prior to appointment.
we probably need to check with city clerk's office on that, because they're the ones that put some of that stuff in there. If it wasn't a state requirement, into what they maintain and make our other boards. I think she tried copying what she has members of the other boards that we have on their residency requirements and things.
Since this is kind of an on-call kind of board that we may never need.
Exactly.
That meet the qualifications on existing boards or council, or can we find people in the community to just say, just make a list of people that we can call? And if it
Correct.
comes up, then we actually officially create the board out of a list of people that would be okay with doing it.
That or what we were talking about doing is just having one meeting. We get the names together, bring the people in for the one meeting, and it hasn't been, and like I said, 1998 was the last time anybody challenged it, because they don't actually get to override anything with this board. This is on the, if they think I'm being too harsh on the way something's designed and I won't accept an alternate method that's equal, that's where the board comes into play. And there, so where you as an engineer, you can have a system this way and I'm not allowing it for some reason. And the board, if it's at a recognized system and everything, that's where the board can come in. No, you're not being fair and equal in it. It's not that they get to override. Well, you said the exit was blocked, and it's not for any of that. This is for construction type activities and things. The design of buildings and whether one system's as good as the other.
The appointment of the members lasts for 3 years. That's a long time to be appointed on a board that probably could have no action.
Right. So maybe they would want to serve on that other, the other board also. On the short-term rental one. I don't know, and that's Lori's not here, so I don't know. Chris, can they serve on 2 boards? Can members serve on 2 boards?
Actually, I don't think we can have them serve on 2 boards. I would have to double check on this though, because these boards may be exceptions. I got to double check on that. This might be different from our, they may not be able to.
Does it have to be a separate board or can it be a combined board? Like, does that have to be a distinct separate board?
It should be distinct and separate because each are going to have their own extent of authorities. So we would have to be able to clarify. It would be essentially, it would be 2 different boards, but just consisting of the same people as members of each board, but each board would have to be very distinct and separate. And we delineate their authorities and duties specific to that particular board. So it'd be like one member would be taking off their hat under Chapter 10 and putting the other one on under the short-term rental ordinances. But each have very distinct separate authorities and reviews and restrictions and limitations on what their review consists of.
All right, so I guess I'm looking at this as overarching name, one name, but like the planning commission, there are times that we, depending on what it is that we're looking at, there are different criteria that we look at. So there are 3 different types of criteria. If you want to rezone something, if there's a PUD or anything like that. And it's very distinct as to the application that's in front of us, which criteria we look at. So something like that, but with this other board.
Right.
So it's still one board, one name. Depending on what it is that you're looking at, depends on the criteria at which you're looking, that you're going to make a decision on.
I gotta look into that a little bit more. I don't know if that would actually be allowed.
Okay.
But that is a very economical way of looking at solving our board problems in terms of finding candidates for our boards.
One of the issues that we got to remember is if we can get this board to do that, that would be great. But I only get to have one person from each of those fields on there. So where your other board, it may be easier for you to find people. The general public can be on the short-term rental board. I can have one person from the general public on the fire building board. And then I got to have somebody from either legal or somebody with that fire code experience or the architect, engineer. And that's where it starts getting into some of that difficulty with those 5 people, where for the short-term rental board, you may be able to find 5 residents, the general public that wants to do it. So.
Right, and we may not have, we may not be utilizing a board as it relates to short-term vacation rental issues, because we may be suggesting, and we do suggest, that it goes through a special magistrate system. Although, I mean, I have a whole presentation to make to the council about why we shouldn't be doing that at all. But the enforcement procedure in terms of it, after having issued a notice of a violation or a citation or a failure to comply, the next steps would essentially go through a prosecution effort through the special magistrate system. So I don't think we would end up having the need for a board under short-term vacation rentals. But if council wants us to entertain that, then we can do that.
I thought we wrote it into the code that we have a short-term rental board.
I'll check. I got to pull that up.
So it sounds like direction for Chris on this particular issue is to go back and look at board composition and see if there's an ability to combine with another board. And if we legally can, we'll try to make that happen for before bringing anything back for council approval. Does that sound like a good direction?
It does, and if we don't, if Chris is correct, and I'm sure he's like really, really close, that we don't need to have a short-term rental board, then we have to update all the short-term rental stuff to remove the piece that says that if there's any problems, you go to the board, and if you're actually going to the magistrate.
Yeah, we have the short-term vacation rental drafted as magistrate. For enforcement procedures, go through magistrate. That was, this was drafted just before I came on board. And that's pretty consistent with the way short-term vacation rental ordinances are drafted. And I think this one was modeled after something that was similar circulating around the state at the time as municipalities were rushing to get their ordinances on the books. And the magistrate system or an enforcement board, and they're read to be the same. Either you have a special magistrate or you have an enforcement board. We happen, in the city of Jacksonville Beach, we happen to use the special magistrate system, which is our enforcement board. And the Florida statutes read them as the same. But we have the magistrate for short-term vacation rentals.
Does anybody remember what the board was? We had a board. I know when we were into, if you don't want to do this board, then we have this other board, but apparently we don't really have another board. Can somebody just clarify what happened?
So was there just
or either Chris?
Was there discussion of using a board, meaning a whole body, not just the special magistrate, but a board of persons that were going to hear appeals and challenges with respect to short-term vacation rentals?
Yep.
Okay. Maybe at that time the possibility of having problems staffing that board came up, so that it was decided the magistrate would already be in place and we could go right through the magistrate.
Yeah, we haven't even tried to staff the board yet. When we've been interviewing for other boards, we've suggested this board, but it hasn't come up. Chris, go ahead.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. We said, oh, well, we can put them on that other board. And I know Lori's been collecting names for that board. But that's the last I've heard of it. But there was definitely a board.
Thank you.
Or talk of a board.
I was just thinking this is maybe just a really long Monday, and all of a sudden I'm making up boards in my mind.
If you are, I am too.
This board was being discussed, the fire building board was being discussed the same time as the vacation rental issue was going on. So it may have been some confusion and overlap, and there may have been some discussion or something. about trying to use that. But I know this, when we were doing the short-term vacation rental, just the part on the board issue was also working through there. And there may have been conversation of trying to use the same board for both. And that may be where it got mixed up.
Yeah, my recollection of it is that when we talked about doing the inspections for short-term rentals, Steve was going to have to be holding those properties to the NFPA standards and also state regulations. And if anyone wanted to contest Steve on his inspections, there needed to be a Board of Appeals. Does that sound correct, Steve?
Contested on that would be through the magistrate, though. That would be like any of the other violation notices. That all goes through the magistrate. This board here is for more of interpretation on building design and substitute material that could be used, alternate ways that would meet the same safety goals. So this is, and that could have been where the confusion came in, like you just said there, Mike. It would be hard, I think, to utilize because it's two totally different systems.
Sounds like we'll have to do a little bit of research and get back to you on the boards. Any other questions or comments for Chris on fire code before we move on to the last item? Chris, do you feel you got the direction you need?
Yes.
With that, why don't you roll into the last item, new chapter 5 animal code and dog leash regs and chart.
Okay. So chapter 5 is the animal code. And I spoke to Ms. Golding today, and she helped a great deal in pointing out some sections that needed continued revision and to be looked into a little more. And also an entire section, which is section section 5-44, which we're going to really look closely at and potentially eliminate or completely overhaul. But we have Tanya and Riley on, and I want to comment that the two of them have made incredible contributions to this effort, and both expressed to me that they need and wanted changes to the animal code, and we needed it updated from decades old language, but also to better help our citizens and our residents and to help our code enforcement officers. So that's what this chapter 5 offers. And we did a lot of research throughout many different jurisdictions and many different legal resources to arrive at what we currently have in our working draft, which I sent out to council about a week ago or so. However, I'm going to say that what I sent out is not going to be anywhere close to what our first reading draft will be. We're going to circle back around, but this project has taken so long, and it's such a large chapter that we wanted to start to get it out there to council and at least get into at least our first briefing schedule. So that's what we've done here. And I have already identified, along again with Ms. Golding's help, as I spoke to her this morning, we have about 8 or 9 sections that we're going to be looking at making changes to. And Tanya and Riley are on the line, and they can answer any questions you may have. But let's see here real quick. And let's see. And then a secondary issue to this is leashes. So we have added parts, and we also have a chart. I think Jacob has it, but there's a secondary discussion to this, which is dogs on leashes at large and on the beach. So 2 different areas of the city. We're trying to address that as well. We don't necessarily have to discuss that part because we'll probably come back around with a revised chapter 5, either in briefing format or in our ordinance for first reading. And at that time, we can talk about leashes. But Jacob, do you happen to have that chart for the leashes that you were able to put up? And then I'll shut up and let council talk to Tanya and Riley. If you don't have the chart, it's okay. We can move right on to Tanya and Riley. So
yeah, I don't
okay.
think I have that.
Okay, no problem. So Tanya and Riley are available if you have any questions for them or for me.
I see one hand raised, Councillor Golding.
Yes, thank you. So Tanya and Riley, thank you so much for working on this, because I understand, you know, how important it is, because I definitely have, well, I've been involved in animal welfare stuff for a while, but also volunteering at the shelter. I know what you guys deal with, and I know that it's, you need the tools to be able to do what you need to do. And so I just wanted to kind of mention a few things for my colleagues. There were some things in the dangerous dog code that I wasn't sure that we had everything in there that was in Florida statute. So I asked Chris about that. There was in the code, we added something about how a scratch would require notification to the health department. And I have some concerns about that, because I can understand a bite, notifying the health department with a bite, but just have some concerns about a scratch rising to the level of having to notify the health department. Tethering, there's a couple of areas in the code that talk about tethering. One of them is like tethering in your yard, and the city of Jacksonville passed a revised tethering code a few years back. And it's basically, the way I would phrase it is, it doesn't allow unattended tethering. And that's because there have been issues with dogs that are left on a tether 24/7, becoming dangerous dogs and that sort of thing. So the philosophy is that and a lot of communities are going towards a more of a no unattended tethering type ordinance. So I wanted to just suggest that we look at that as well. We had something in here about abandonment, and one of the things that constituted abandonment was if the animal was left unattended on private property. And I think that needs some clarification, because if I leave my dog on my private property, you know, I think that that's just not detailed enough. You know, maybe it needs to have some more detail added to that. And then there's some language in here about auctioning animals. And so I wanted to ask Riley and Tanya to give us a little more information about that, because that was something I wasn't really familiar with. And then there was mention about destroying an animal because the owner could not care for the animal, and I have concerns about that. And also, the ordinance mentions euthanizing pets that have distemper or parvovirus, and I have concerns about that, because both of those are treatable, and pets can recover from that. So anyway, I think Riley, if you want to talk to any of those things real quickly. The other thing too, going back to the tethering, the other tethering item was that Jacksonville passed as well, was that if you carry a dog in the bed of a truck, instead of tethering it in one place, they say you need to tether it in 2 or more locations, which would keep that dog from being thrown out of the truck or jumping out of the truck. And so I'd like for us to look at that as well, and perhaps do, you know, mirror our language to what Jacksonville has as well.
And Sandy, if I can add, you also were questioning about feral cats. Is that right? How are the feral cats handled and addressed? Okay.
Right, right.
Just before Tanya and Riley answer, we've started to make some of these changes already and these revisions, but Tanya and Riley can answer some of your questions. And ladies, see if you can address feral cats too.
Okay. Which question would you rather me answer you more? Because I know you went down a list of a whole bunch of questions.
So I would answer the one that chapter.
Because I know we did remove about the scratches already. We removed that from the dangerous dog portion. We were looking over the tethering already that you did send us about. In reference to the feral cats, we're not required to handle feral cats, especially if they've already been spayed or neutered. We're not required to take care of them. They do usually get transported right back to the same property that we picked them up from. We don't have to take care of them necessarily because they are already been taken care of. They've already been spayed, neutered, taken care of. So they just get transported right back to the same property. That's why we kind of put it in there the way that it was.
But are you still, I guess, are you still going to take in feral cats? You'll just,
So if
that
it's
are
not
spayed or neutered?
Yeah, so if it's
Okay.
not ear tipped and we trap it, we will put it through the program and things like that. If it is sick, it'll get taken care of. It's just worded that way so that people don't assume that we'll take in something that has already been taken care of and then try to adopt it out, because if you try to adopt out a feral cat and make it an inside cat, it will not be a very happy cat. Yeah, it will make somebody's house a destroyed house. Not a good time. So I'm trying to get through all of your questions. You threw a lot at me. So trying to remember a couple more. With the tethering, I do like the idea that you had with Jacksonville's of tethering in 2 or more places, and also going with not having unattended tethering too. With the distemper and parvo, I would like to keep it just in case, because it does say may. There are a lot of puppies that do not recover with parvo. It does depend on the vet that you take them to, and it does depend on the puppy and their immune systems, and also the type of puppies or the type of dogs. If they have a strong immune system, they do recover pretty quickly, but a lot of older dogs and things like that, they don't recover. And even if they do recover, they can still spread the disease for up to 2 or 3 months. So it's good to keep it in there as a just in case measurement. They still will go to the vet, and that's up to the vet to determine. That's not really up for us to determine. Trying to think of another question you asked me in here.
I had a question about the tethering. It says,
Yeah.
if we're talking about no unattended tethering,
Yeah.
is there like any time limit on that? Is it like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or just you can't walk away if you're a dog owner, for,
When we say unattended tethering, I would say that would be people who would leave their dogs outside and go to work all day long.
Yep. Should it be defined like anything over an hour or anything 30 minutes, Sandy? I just don't know.
Jacksonville basically just says that you either need to be within the area, like, so you could be in the house but be able to see the animal, or so it's mainly so that you're not like Riley says, you're not going to work and leaving them tethered out there all day. So
Yeah.
you need to be in the area.
Okay.
Is there anything I missed, Sandy?
I don't tether Pineapple, just in case anybody wants to know.
I kind of figured you didn't, because Pineapple gets to ride in your golf cart. So
the other section, Riley, was really the section 5-44, which is the auction and the disposal. In that section, I emailed Sandy today that we're going to do a complete overhaul on that and revision.
Yeah, I don't really remember adding that one in there. I don't know if we just copied that from the statute and didn't get time to read through that one and check it. But we definitely don't do auctions here. So we do need to reread through that and go over that one again. But that is something we will be taking out. Because we don't do auctions, so.
Yeah, and do you want to explain a little bit about why we changed the penalties section and how the need for you to have a penalty section with teeth, and why that's important to you and how it helps you in your job? And
which penalty sections are we talking about? Just
in
all
5-32.
Hold on.
Hold
on.
And while she's looking, just let me add that, in meeting with GP, he made it clear, that he wanted to have our officers feel that they were armed and enabled with something that gives them the impact to enforce against violators of this particular animal code, so that they feel that they've been empowered to really make an impact and take a change, make a change. And so the penalties section needed a little more behind it. Are you ladies at 532?
Yeah, if you want to talk on it.
So, Chris, we're looking at, you said 532? Is that what you're talking about, penalties?
Right.
Okay,
So that one's just for the dangerous dog one.
Yeah.
okay.
You want to talk about that or any of the other penalties or enforcement tools that you have?
Well, for any of the other ones, I'd say we definitely need more bite to it, because even with our leash laws, especially on the beach, if you give somebody a $50 ticket, they just most of them just rip it up right in front of me. It means nothing to them. $50 is kind of like $5 to them. And especially if we start doing penalties where first time's maybe $50, but the second offense is $75 or $100, and you go up from there, people tend to kind of say, oh, maybe I should leave my dog on a leash, or maybe I should be paying attention. And then you go from that to dog in a hot car, where that should now be maybe $250 to $500. People realize, hey, maybe I shouldn't be leaving my dog in this type of circumstance, putting him in this type of neglect. It puts them at kind of a halt. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this to my dog. Maybe I shouldn't be putting myself in this kind of position. And it also, it helps us in a way. And even if I don't write them that ticket, I can say, hey, this is how much it would have been had I written you this ticket, and kind of warn them in a way. And it's a lot more helpful than saying, hey, this would have been $50. They're like, oh, $50, that's whatever. It doesn't matter to me. So yeah, it's a lot more helpful, especially now, because I used to write for our hot car tickets. I used to only write the $50, and now I'm able to write the $100, and people are like, are you kidding me? $100? I'm not going to pay $100 ticket. I'm taking you to court. So it's better. And it could be even better if we write higher penalties too. But
I think it's going to get the word out to everybody. One, we're updating, which we haven't done in a very, very long time, what the fines are. And I think they'll take it a little more serious as far as adhering to what the ordinances are with his increased penalties. Because when you start talking about people's pocketbooks, they, you would hope that they would look out after the welfare of their animals and do what's right, but sometimes they don't. But when you start talking money, then all of a sudden their attitude changes and they start adhering to what the ordinances are. So it gives Riley and the other officer, animal control officer, a little more as far as tools to work with for enforcement.
Well, I have to say, I think the biggest complaints I get from people is the habitual off-leash activity on the beach. And so I think that the increasing in fines is really important to address that, because I do agree. There's a lot of people out there that they're just like,
yeah,
that's fine. Give
that's
me the
price.
ticket.
Yeah. They think that's the price of just being able to take their dog outside, is, oh, it's just $50 a month to have my dog off leash on the beach. So they pay it. That doesn't matter to them.
Yeah. So no, I totally support that. And I'm glad that you're doing that.
Thank you.
So we'll come back around with another round of Chapter 5, and also we'll at that time discuss the leash, the length of leash in regard to on beach and at large. We'll save that for another time. But now,
are we increasing the fine from $50 to $250?
For leash laws and just general things, it's just going to be the $50, and then say if it was their second offense, it'll go up to 75 and things like that. I don't think that's in the Chapter 5 rewrite we sent you, but if it's a neglect or cruelty charge, something higher of an offense, so like a dog and hot car, or
I guess my question is on page 20 of 31. In the, where'd it go?
31. What are we talking
Sorry, I might have missed a page. Oh, I did. I don't, okay. No, we're good. Sorry.
No,
Oh.
you did include the tiered because it's on page 9.
Okay.
First offense, second offense, third offense,
I
fourth
got
offense.
you. I just saw the one on,
Yeah.
I missed page 19. Sorry. We're good.
Okay.
Okay.
And Mike, may I add something?
Oh, there it is. Okay. Maybe it did.
You just did.
See it.
Okay.
When is it?
Chris, I'm not sure whether this is possible. Instead of doing this, this whole thing at once, can we take, Riley identifies the top 2 things, fix those by subsection, and then move on to the next top 2 things? Because here's my concern and my problem. At this rate, we will be in next summer before this whole chapter gets resolved. And I have I have limited enforcement tools, leashes on the beach, increased fines. Can we, Chris, is it possible to take one, to say, Riley, what's your top 2 offenses and what 2 things do you need right now, and work on that wording with council, get that section passed, and pass them by sections and make this an ongoing project? Because some of this stuff is, it doesn't come up very often. And I feel my officers' hands are tied, not just the ACOs, but my police officers' hands are tied with the things that we encounter every day.
Right. Yes, we can break it up. I'm concerned about any passing a section through, one or 2 sections or articles through one ordinance, and then when we get to the next section or ordinance, we see some relationship between the 2. We would have to then go back and fix the first.
Okay.
So we're, rather than the piecemeal, we're trying to do it as one whole.
Okay.
That there's going to be essentially a replacement of Chapter 5. It breaks down to a replacement.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Yeah, that's logistically and practically, that's the only hesitation we have.
Okay.
Which is a real issue.
And keep in mind, we're coming up to our time limit here. We've only got a couple of minutes left. So Chris, Riley, and Tanya, do you all have the direction you need to go back and make some revisions and come back with another version? Council, any final comments for them on that item?
I just want to thank them for doing their job. I know it's pretty thankless in the community, but y'all are doing fantastic. I hear nothing but good things. And I like the way, even when people are rude to you, I like the fact that you're very professional and you treat them all with respect.
Okay, I think that wraps up item number 4. We'll go ahead and end the council briefing, and we'll all be hopping back on to the next Zoom call, which will start at 7 o'clock regular council meeting. See you all then.